Good morning and welcome to the 12/30/2020 pre-market plan. So I'm going to run through my list as usual, kind of give you my top picks, and then we'll go over a couple other charts if people still have questions. Okay, I'm starting off with Amazon. It's just so interesting how things change based on when I originally looked at these charts. Looking at the volume profile, it's near the top, but that point of control is mid-range, so that's not giving me a whole heck of a lot of information right now. Once again, this kind of pattern where you've got a big up candle, this type of candle is more of a thinking candle or a spinning top doji, they call it, where it kind of tested both sides and ended up in the middle. Almost like consolidation. We're a lot higher. I would expect Amazon, let me just check something over here. If it is strong, obviously to continue on up, and looking at the monthly, it may be trying to take out the previous month's highs up here at 33.42. The rate. Oh, that's where we're at pre-market. Sorry. Why is my chart not showing me what this level is? 33.71, which Amazon's totally capable of. So the question becomes with this gap, does it hold that gap and continue higher out of the gate? Or does it come back and test like it loves to do previous day's close? So looking at the chart, it looks like an awfully strong volume profile at this point, but we'll have to see how she shapes up. So at this point, I'm looking for a long, it's a massive gap. Once again, hard to say exactly what it'll do here, but I did mark out some weekly levels from previous week's highs and so forth that it may want to go out and try to test. I mean, we're certainly not going to, well, I guess we could take the month green. We're not going to get anywhere close to these highs, I wouldn't think, before the month's over. Looking at this volume profile pre-market, again, looks really, really strong. It's way above that point of control. It's near the top of the range, though. So likelihood is if it drops below that point of control, things shift before open, we're going to see a bit of a pullback and then maybe a continuation higher. I do like the close from 2 days ago as an area for it to come down and test before it goes higher. FSLY, I like this a lot for a long as it stands right now. We've got FSLY near the bottom of the pre-market volume profile. It is currently above the point of control. I do like the setup on the daily too for a 2-2 reversal back to the upside. Your target would be the top of this candle. That's awfully far. Let me just double check again what FSLY's range is. Well, range is 6, and it was a small candle yesterday. So that's, closer to 10. It's possible. I guess we'll see what it wants to do. But you'll notice, and the thing to pay attention to when you're looking at charts for me is where is it in relation to the previous day's close. So right now we're well above that, and to me it's looking strong. So like that for a long. JMIA, right now we are in the middle of that inside candle. Earlier we were up towards the top of the range, so it looked like the possibility for it to break out to the upside was there. As I'm looking at volume profile, I like that it's heading down to the bottom. If we can get point of control underneath near the market open, then I would like the volume profile in agreement with the daily for a pop back up. As it stands right now with these inside candles, ideally you want to trade the break of the inside candle unless you're just looking for a quick deal at the open with that perfect volume profile setup where essentially we're at the bottom of the range, above point of control, and your target is really up here. That's not a heck of a lot of movement though. So with this one, just keep an eye on when it breaks that daily level on either side. That's the safer way to play it. Neil, I really like this for a long. I've got, if you look at the weekly, again, we've got that shooter counters hammer consolidation pattern. It really didn't do much for the last couple weeks. And now we're right near taking out the close from what, almost 3 weeks ago here. I marked that level on my chart. We're right below it pre-market. I think there's a strong likelihood it'll head back up. NEO's average to range is about 3 points, so not huge. But let's just say she opens up. Look at the pre-market volume profile really quick. Hold on 1 minute. Sync this and just see where this level is. I wouldn't doubt it if it kind of came down and tested yesterday's highs and then headed higher. In fact, it may do that pre-market and be along and be ready to go. So your magnitude, you just look left and you start marking off these levels, and magnitude is going to be about 3 points up. It can go higher, but just so you know where your targets are. NVIDIA, that's also looking really, really strong here. The price action, I mean, on some of these is just wonky though. They're not pretty looking charts necessarily. But we do potentially have a low, a high, a higher low, and then certainly pre-market, it's well above yesterday's close, and it's above, if we look at the weekly, it's above the, or right, why did I move that little, hold on 1 second, what am I doing here? Yeah, it's right above, or almost right on the close from last week. So I do like this as for a reversal. Looking at the volume profile, we're way at the top, but your point of control and so forth haven't moved up. My thought is that it would go down and test before it continues higher. May test the weekly level, and it may come all the way back down to the close. And if it's strong, it'll pop there. Let's mark that out real quick. So we'll see. A couple of the ones coming up are looking even better. Okay, so this is different than it was when I looked at it before. So when I looked at it a little bit ago, it was up near the top of the range, looking real strong, like it wanted to possibly do a 2-2 reversal on the daily. Now I'm getting a little more iffy about it. It's above yesterday's close, but just barely. So looking at it right now, that may negate, we'll have to see what it does pre-market, the 2-2 reversal I was looking for. Right now it almost looks like we've got a down candle with a thinking spinning top doji for a continued move down. So different than what it looked like before. If it continues to look like that, I would think there's a higher likelihood we continue down. Peloton is still holding a nice gap for a 2-2 reversal on the daily. I really like that setup. Let me see here. Again, with these gaps, you just gotta wait and see if it holds. Gaps, typically, if they're gonna retest, they typically do it at or very near the open. If we look at the volume profile, is heading back down to the top of that range. And I did put the buy-sell orders out there. So on the right is the number of buyers and the number of sellers. So if it gets down to the bottom of the range and we don't really have any more sellers, that bodes well for that reversal back up. So Peloton I really like for a long, based on how it looks now. RIOT, this is a blockchain stock. As Rob said, it used to be somebody way back here when Bitcoin had that pop up to, I think it was, 20 grand. Let me just jump back, come on. So there's exhaustion risk, of course, because it's had a pretty nice move up here. Although if we look at these two candles, once again, this is almost more consolidation and holding a level than it is a giant step up, just because the closes aren't too far away from each other. Looking at the volume profile, if it kind of comes back down here and tests and takes off, it's looking pretty strong. So I would just mark the highs from yesterday on the chart, and let's see where that lines up on the 5-minute. Sync to all charts. Yeah, so it's possible that it comes back down and tests the highs from yesterday and then continues higher, but I do really like that from along, and there's a ton of room to move. Right now, it's got a range of about 2 points, not huge, but that's an awful lot for a, $16, $17 stock. Roku. Let's see what we got here. I like this type of pattern. Again, when you have a little doji like this, it can be difficult to tell because it's not a clear hammer that shows a reversal. And we notice that pre-market is now slightly below yesterday's close. So as it stands right now, it's looking fairly weak. And that, to me, looks like a continuation to the downside with magnitude around 329.50, or at least down to yesterday's lows, 332.20. Then we've got Starbucks. I like for a continued long. We have full time frame continuity. We still haven't gone up and retested these all-time highs at 106. I would expect that today it will at least do that and potentially close higher. Starbucks range, I think it's just a couple points, so it's not overly, about 2 points. But that's where I think it's headed. Again, wait and see where we go. Oftentimes it'll come down and retest that previous day's close. TDOC, I really like this for a 2-2 reversal. This is another one of my PTON and TDOC are probably the ones we've gone through so far. My two favorite setups as it stands now. We're at yesterday's highs. So looking at volume profile, I do see that pre-market we're effectively out of buyers right here at the top. So if it's strong, I would expect it to come down and retest close to at least yesterday's close. Mark that. So with any of these that gap, just understand that oftentimes that's just the natural movement of stocks. And yesterday's close lines up pretty well with volume profile. Out of the gate, if it stays up here, I would expect it comes back down, tests, and then continues on up. And we've got real good magnitude. If we look left, 204, 206 on up. I mean, your ultimate magnitude would be this 210. But we'll see if she's strong enough to get there. Tesla, I also like for a long. We're well above yesterday's highs. She's at the top of the range. We are currently below volume profile. So once again, I expect a test. If it's real strong, a test of yesterday's highs and then for it to take off. Certainly it could come down to the close and test and go up, but decent magnitude there. Tesla is going to be a top watch to the long side for me. Alta. That's changing from where it was before. It was up quite a bit higher. I'm looking like I wanted to be a long, so I don't like this quite as much now that I am looking at it. It was looking like it was going to be much higher pre-market and then a continuation long. We do have almost full-time time frame continuity. You know, the thing with time frame continuity out of the gate is I know it can be a really big deal. And when you get situations like Starbucks where you have that full-time frame continuity and we're not all that far from all-time highs, there's a strong likelihood it's going to bang it back up there. On trades where you get some of this conflicting information, if we're doing a day trade out of the gate, that conflict on time frame continuity doesn't bother me as much. Where that becomes really important, in my opinion, is when you're doing some of the longer holds and the swings. It lines up much, much better if you do have that full time frame continuity. So back to this chart right now, volume profile pre-market isn't giving us a lot of help. And that setup to me almost looks more like a short back to the downside. That's one, again, I don't like it as much as I did before. Keep an eye on it though. It has some good range and, could make that continuation back up. Not my favorite.
Hey, Jen.
No. Yeah.
It's Kevin.
Oh, yeah.
If you mind, can I weigh in a little bit on
Sure,
what you just said?
absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot lately about the whole idea of full time frame continuity and when is it necessary. And you just nailed it right there. Is your focus going to be day trading, or are you looking for that like all day hold, add? It's like an all day trade where it's just running all day, or it's puking all day, or is it a swing trade, or is it a longer term trade? That's when the full time frame continuity is super important. If you're just doing a day trade where you're going to be in and out really quickly, it's not really as necessary. Maybe you want the daily and the 60 to match, but that's about it.
Oh, thanks for chiming in there. Yeah, because I think people start to freak out and they don't want to take trades when they work really, really well, or people think I don't look at the higher time frames. For me, when I'm day trading, I'm looking at the higher time frames and I'm taking my ideas from that place. And then I'm letting the lower time frames tell me where to go. And Kevin and I were talking about this yesterday. Right now, given the type of market that we're in, even if your trade works out, if you're trading out the higher time frames, some of those holds, if you go and look at the lower, are just ugly. Like they're very difficult to hold through. So we've kind of been looking at those lower time frames, as you know, I do that often, to get into those trades. Really helps with your entry and can keep you out of some trouble that you really just can't see, in my opinion, on the longer time frames. So let's see. Again, it's looking different than it did before. We are up quite a bit higher, and I liked that for a reversal of the upside. Now it's kind of toward the bottom edge of that range. I liked that it was holding this 113-ish level for continuation higher. Now I'm not quite as sure. So that's when you'll just have to let it tell you. The setup is different than what I thought it would be when I was looking at it before. So not one of my top watches. Zoom, on the other hand, I do like for a long. Oftentimes at the bottom of a pattern, someone had asked me the other day, this is an inside shooter, basically. But look where it is in the pattern, because you can't just look at a candle and say, okay, because it's a shooter, that's a continuation down. No, that's not always the case, because we're potentially at the bottom of this pattern. I'm not saying we are, but potentially. So a shooter like that, where we're holding this level of 350-ish, to me indicates maybe we're finding, an area where price wants to move up. Just like here, we have this big hammer. That's at the top of this little deal. That was actually a bullish sign. So you cannot take a candle and assume just because it's formed a certain way it means XYZ. You actually got to look at it in the context of the story and what the market's trying to tell you. So right now at least, we've held this level. It doesn't seem to want lower. We've gapped way up. We've certainly got magnitude up to that 373. If we look at pre-market, again, I would expect that it comes back down and probably tests maybe yesterday's close before, a continuation higher. We do have this inside candle, so of course you can wait and trade the break on either side. Sometimes I wait to trade that break and sometimes I don't. And there's so many nuances in trading. I think that's the difficulty of it. And really what it comes down to is right now it's showing strength. So if it comes down and tests close and bounces, to me that's normal, and I would probably take it right there and not wait for it to break that wick, because at that point I would have missed quite a bit of range on that trade. So I really like Zoom for long. And then we're back at the beginning. Let me just double check the futures again and see what we're shaping up like. Qs are looking strong. SPY. I don't really look at diamonds all that much typically. SPY's looking a little bit weak. Still a gap up, but it's coming back down. They're both looking fairly strong right now. So we'll have to see how things open. We could certainly get that kind of deal where it opens and everything just fails and goes lower. But right now I do, my top setups are really the longs. If anyone's interested in shorts, there's some that I didn't really put on the list, but Chewy, Crowd, D-Dog, and DKNG are, I'll just pull up one of them. Let me just pull up DKNG, and then I'll see if anyone has some questions they want to go over. Have those nice pivot machine gun setups possible back to the downside. DKNG on the pre-market volume profile, it's near the top of the range. It's currently below the point of control, or the developing point of control. To me, looking at this chart, it looks like a good continuation down. We have some previous weekly levels that aren't too far away. So if you're interested in shorts, those are all pivot machine gun type setups. And certainly with the rollover of the month in January, looking at some of these monthly charts and so forth, they could be absolutely gorgeous for those 2-2 reversals back to the downside. But top watches for me, PTON, RIOT, TDOC, and Tesla. For the longs as it stands now, questions, I got a couple minutes before I got to jump and kind of get my stuff set up. Any charts you guys want to run through real quick?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah, just on I guess a question when you were going over I think it was PTON,
Yeah.
which so it was at the I think you were looking as a long, right? But it was on the, I guess it's dropped back a little bit now.
Yep,
It was
starting to
more on the
drop
top
back.
of the range.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But when it's at the top of that range, you don't take the trade out of the gate, right? You wait for it to kind of, all right, let's see what it does and see if it's gonna test previous day's close, and then you look for that strat reversal back up, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are times where that volume profile setup is just amazing out of the gate. This one is looking pretty darn good right here in that it's come back
Yeah.
down to the bottom of that range. I like that. But you do have to be a little bit patient and just make sure. So if you're asking, do I jump into things right away? What I'll do in a case, if I think it's possibly a right out of the gate trade, is that's where I go down to something like a 15-second. Let me see if I can just, some of these don't have much clarity on the 15-second chart. There's not a lot of action there, but what I like is we're near the bottom. You can see there's 0 sellers right here at the bottom. So what I would do is wait for it to open and establish an uptrend. So an uptrend again is a low, a higher low, and a higher high, and then I wait for a little TTO, and then I would get in long. So does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah, it does. That's on the 15-second that you're talking about, right?
Yeah,
So
I mean, you can watch the 1 minute. You can watch the 5 minute, but you may miss it by then. So
yeah,
with the 15-second, you're really gonna see. Was it? Like, here's a good example. I think it was Apple yesterday or a couple days ago. Just bear with me one. Turn pre-market off. I'm gonna make this chart bigger and turn pre-market off because I think it was Apple. Turn this off real quick just so you guys can see where you could see it on the 1 minute, but it was it a couple days ago. It's kind of like basing out after the. Okay, so here it is. Sorry, the volume profile is. So you see these candles right here where you've got a low, a high, a higher low. It's difficult to see. Let me make that even bigger.
yeah. I see it.
Yeah, which is your perfect uptrend. It was so clear on the 15-second that you could see it was doing that. If you're a newer trader, that might be a lot more difficult to see where it's clearly delineated on that 15-second chart. Of course, the way this one shaped up, had you been watching the 1 minute, you could have just gotten in over this this inside candle and taken it long, and that was a great setup. Doesn't always work out that way, but that's why in cases where I think there's a trade out of the open, I'll often have that 15-second chart up. The one thing I want to caution you on, though, if you do that, do not watch the 15-second to stay in your trade, because you'll see, like these pullbacks, and they look big, and then you realize, wait a minute, that's like a quarter of a candle. And so in the past,
Yeah.
I've made the mistake of watching the 15 seconds, and I'm like, what? And I'm like, my hand goes on that trigger to get out of the trade, and then I'm like, what am I doing? That was a teeny pullback where really I could have added, because my idea of where it was headed was still really good. That makes sense. Other questions?
Yep.
Get rid of this stuff. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. All right, guys, have a safe day trading, and I'll talk to you in a little bit.